And the reason why I have to do this is partly because I feel obliged to provide some kind of sense making and pulling together all these different things. But first, gratitudes to the IPS events team and to Tote Board, because doing conferences like this, if you don't see it, I mean, I rarely come and do the prep, but I came yesterday and it's like everyone doing a lot of work. And, it's even Toad tells me, we really got a good deal. IPS do this for us. So, but thanks, Toad, for the partnership. Without you, we can't do this either. So closing reflections. I want to start with paradigms, worldviews, and institutional logics, because this is how we see problems in the nonprofit sector. Who has problems and who has solutions, right? Is it certain groups have problems and others have solutions and you solve it for them? Who can legitimately solve these problems? Do they have to be professionals or can they just be your neighbors? And the kind of solutions that we can even conceive of are informed by our worldview, a way of seeing and thinking about the world, often using cognitive shortcuts, right? And institutionalized scripts, supported by no longer questioned assumptions. These are things that are, because they're part of the paradigm, we just kind of perform it. It's just part of our thinking. And here today, we have considered alternative paradigms that actually exist in parallel with one another. I want to talk about the dominant paradigm, which is service provision. Resourcing, well, so this dominant paradigm works like this, right? Its logic is this. Resourcing is through state or philanthropic funding. If there's any alternative revenue sources and you can get volunteers, students who are free to come defray costs, wow, great. It's typically centrally administered, managed, and authorities are regulating these if they're a very important service. They are also increasingly professionally delivered and expected to have specialized expertise informed by research or evidence. Preferably, if you can, do this at scale. And actually, competition between different providers helps improve quality and efficiency. And I've even heard of thinking about, there's so many nonprofits, wouldn't a large merger be kind of nice? So instead of dealing with a few big providers. But that's the dominant paradigm. And actually, the dominant paradigm has worked very well for lots of problems. If not, it wouldn't even be the dominant paradigm. So the status quo is not necessarily the issue. But there are limits, This, I want to say, is just to kind of bring home the point, this is the logic of administration and the market. And to kind of oversimplify it a bit, this logic is asking this question: how do we make sure that the most competent professionals and agencies deliver the right type of intervention or program for the right problem? Typically specialized, preferably at scale, so that the most impact is delivered with the greatest efficiency. That's our thinking, right? It's hard to get out of this framework. Maybe you don't need to get out of the framework. This works for lots of things. But I'll give you an example. So if we have disadvantaged youth and they don't do so well in school, right? Our kind of go-to intervention is tutoring. You don't do so well in school, so we get tutors for you. If we cannot afford tutoring, we'll find volunteer tutors or we'll subsidize the tutoring. So you start with a dimension that you can intervene on. And it's kind of attractive because it's implementable. You know how to get people to come and do tuition. And this is not just the SINDAS and Mendaki CDAC. Lots of social service agencies actually do this, right? We have youth. And youth don't do well in school for whatever reasons, give them tuition. And you might even hope, that this somehow unravels some of the interconnected problems that they have. Maybe if they did well in school, they'll get along with their teachers better, and maybe, in the long run, they'll have a better family life, have a better future. One thing is, hopefully we just do this tuition thing and their problems unravel. Problems don't unravel so easily in the social context. It sometimes unravels in the developing world, right? If you build a well, people have access to clean water, their health outcomes go up, their education outcomes go up, etc. Sometimes it has quality, but fat hope of that working out in the social space so easily. Eventually, this reveals itself, after doing this for some time, that it's actually a wicked problem. And any single functionally specialized intervention cannot address the problem as a whole. But we usually continue utilizing the same logic because something else is literally quite unthinkable. Not just unthinkable, it's literally unthinkable because we don't think about it. It's just outside the paradigm. So we think along the same paradigm and we think, okay, of course we know that these kids, they don't have enough money, their family is in crisis, whatever, so we'll find a caseworker, we'll find whatever, and we'll stitch it up. We'll create wraparound care, and we'll offer it, we'll coordinate the services. But when all else fails, right, the wicked problems don't get resolved so easily, right? So the funders can blame the agencies, and then the professionals eventually can blame the clients because, it's so frustrating, right? I do all this work, and then you don't improve. Must be agencies not equipped, not trained well. And then professionals can say, wow, I spend so much time with you. And some people improve. So those that don't must be your problem, right? You're not committed to change yourself. And it's easy to do that. There's a temptation to do that. And the way of looking at these then becomes personal troubles, right? It's an individual level problem due to bad luck or moral failing. And so the suggestion and recommendation then is, okay, we need better training. We need better evaluation of programs is suggested. So that's the logic of administration and the market. And, actually, no one is to blame. This actually may be the natural limits of the paradigm. Another logic that you've seen here is the logic of community building. How do we unlock the unrecognized strengths, hidden potential, and untapped capacities of communities facing systematic disadvantages so they can collectively figure out meaningful solutions? And meaningful meaning that it is respectful of their values and culture. It is something that is suitable for the unique circumstances they face, and they offer a chance of overcoming the structural disadvantages. Which is why Baltimore was interesting to us, right? It's not tuition. It's like, wow, these people are getting slightly older youths. Instead of having to flip burgers, they get them, they recognize that they can do knowledge work, and they teach the slightly younger youth. That's peer-to-peer learning, right? That's community coming together. And it's a different thing, because if it wasn't a different thing, we would have thought of it. It's different. We're not so, this muscle is not so well expressed here, so we don't see these kind of solutions as well. So what they do is, what if we can tap into the youth's ability to learn and teach one another? What if slightly older youths teach younger kids? Would this displace the need for private expert tutors? And actually, Cinda and Beyond Social Services, Cinda intends to start a pilot with us, and some of the, I think Rachel is gone, and everyone's thinking, this is kind of interesting, maybe we want to do it. And so we want to hold this space for whoever's interested in peer-to-peer learning, right, to come and join us, and we'll just learn from each other. Everybody do their own iterations of peer-to-peer learning and see what we can learn. And this constitutes, of course, a different answer to who or what is the problem and who has the solutions. The youth have their own solutions. You just need a bit of support. And when your unit of analysis is the community at large, it's not a case, it's not an individual, you also kind of tend to see the problem as systemic in nature. And what is the systemic issue? There's unhealthy academic competition. I said in an earlier panel that, when I was in school, I never felt that school was fun with my friends. It wasn't learning, I wasn't helping you. All of you in my class, even if you're friends, you're my competition. If you do better, you get A and I get B, I feel frustrated, I feel dismayed. Why can't we have an environment whereby if you did well in school, I am so joyful for you at your success, plus if you're smart, you can teach me. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen for, because this is a different, the system is set up this way for competition, right? And of course, the private tuition industry, which is a billion-dollar industry, is kind of benefiting from the anxieties of parents, teachers, and students alike. So the dominant paradigm imposes, some real pushbacks and constraints, even as we're thinking about doing all this peer-to-peer learning, right? Immediately, there are questions of, if you get used to teach, how do you know that they will teach properly? How do you... and is it safe? Where is it going to be done? Is it going to be done in the neighbor's home? Then where's all the risk and the counter? So if you put on a professional lens, immediately all the questions emerge, obstacles to this way of thinking and working, which are perfectly legitimate, right? There's that paradigm. There's this paradigm. Today's conversation is about how to kind of converge somewhere. And actually, there's another logic, which is part of... So this logic is the non-profit space logic, right? There's the state, there's the market. The dominant paradigm, the non-profit space, at least it seems in Singapore, is service provision. Then there's a bit of it in community building. And there's even much less here, the logic of mutual aid, which is how can regular people or commoners help one another without the need for permission, professionals, or philanthropy. An example of that is Denise doing the Abundant Community Initiative, right? No need professionals, no need social workers to tell you this or that. No need to get funding from a funder. No need permission from anybody, as long as your peers do it. So it's different. It's not 3P. It's not all the organizations on board do something. It's just P2P. As long as your peers, a small group, agree that you want to do this, you can do it. And so we go back to the same examples. Instead of a non-profit organization, all community workers do the peer learning. Can residents, neighbors, and citizens organize their own peer learning circles? And that's the big question mark, because it often feels that a lot of reason why you do community work is that the community isn't ready. So as Ruth was saying, you do first and hope to divest later. Then the question is, then is the divesting, then the community ownership themselves, is it better? It's a big question. I don't really have answers to that, but it's just kind of slightly different. Community building by community workers still can be quite different from mutual aid to some extent. And so if I'm thinking I could either work with Cinda and start a peer-to-peer learning circles for youths, or I can start mutual aid logic and try a learning circle in my neighborhood, right, at Dover, and say, oh, how many parents are here? How many of them have young kids? Instead of sending them to after-school care and just, homework support and eat chicken nuggets, can we rotate? Like parent A, all the kids go to your house and you feed them better food, biscuits and carrot sticks, and then you take them for one day, then Tuesday I'll take them, Wednesday somebody takes them, and this is mutual aid. There's no organization involved. Very difficult, but kind of interesting to consider. So one of the ideas here was you got to walk the talk. So see how. The challenge here is, of course, few professionals see this as their role, and a few service providers are set up or incentivized to focus on encouraging mutual aid. This is the third, even further down, the logic of commoning. How can we create, enlarge, or safeguard commonly shared assets in a way that everyone can contribute jointly and benefit collectively from? And so instead of just do learning circles, if you do learning circles and you share it and you create this knowledge base where everybody can come and share. You do a DIY kit, for example. And I talk about this because we had Community Circles UK come and share with us, and they basically create a circle of support around somebody with disabilities or long-term health issues. And it was such a nice model, and you can read about it, but we thought, great, let's try this here. And I thought I would have to pay a lot of money. I put aside 10K for consultancy fees so that we can get Community Circles UK to share their expertise with us so we can implement it here. And then I went to their website and said, wow, there's all this, you can pay for that, but there's all this do-it-yourself kit, modular videos done so nicely and smoothly that after I went through the whole thing, I feel, hey, we can do this. No need to pay them any more money. And then I asked them, why do you do that? And he said, yeah, it's a really bad business model. Everybody, all my stakeholders tell me this is a really bad business model. But it occurs to me this is a really good social model, right? This is contributing to the commons. Instead of enclosing it, commodifying something that you have, hoping to sell it, you are making it free. And if everybody does that, right, you contribute to the collective wealth knowledge. Free to access, easy, but to do this well, it has to be free to access, easy to contribute to, adaptable to unique circumstances, through something called reuse and remix. The people who do open education resources, they believe education should be free. All the curriculum, all the textbooks or whatever is free, they share. And people are free to take that and use it and remix it in ways that are meaningful to their own communities of learning. And through this, the collective wealth of knowledge increases. So that's the logic of commoning. I've just kind of put it down on the table just to kind of spell out. In education, there's of course public schools, and then if you think Singapore, every school is good school, but other places, private schools are the only good schools. And then if that's a problem, the green color space is the non-profit space. What do? You can use the dominant paradigm of service provision, and you can go, let's subsidize or have volunteer tutors. Or you can go the route of community building and mutual aid, start peer-to-peer learning, consider democratic schools, or you go even further and say, should we even pay for education? Why should? The research articles we write, It's behind a paywall, and I got to pay $2,000-3,000 just so that everyone can access my research. Who benefits from that? Not me, not you, but the publishers lah. The commons is always under threat from enclosure, from markets, from commodification. If you look at income and economic inclusion, of course, government can give financial assistance, and the market say, as long as economic growth, everyone, rising tide raises all boats. In the non-profit space, we say, okay, this is great. There are certain groups of people find it difficult to get jobs, so let's give them job support, job coaching, job placement. SUSS is actually doing something really interesting here. So it's a really innovative space whereby it's an inclusive business incubator. So instead of the likes of Soft N+1 or Adrian being the entrepreneurs who go through an incubation and support, it is people with disabilities. So there's something that they're thinking about, or maybe they've started, I don't know. But there's still this paradigm of doing something for them. Worker-owned co-ops, to me, is a different logic, right? It is, instead of doing something for the people are themselves doing it, right? So sometimes social enterprises, like, maybe you're a really successful businessman, you set up a restaurant and you hire people in need and you pay them a good wage and you save them, but that's saving somebody. I kind of like the worker-owned co-ops idea because it is people who are participating in resolving their own issues. And what better way to resolve this tension between what an employer wants and what an owner wants? Labor rights, Ang Hin Kee earlier on was saying, you need legislation, you need all that. But if the worker were the owner, you bypass all that difficulty. And so I really like that one. And of course, the commons is, what if our income, our middle class income, we see it as not ours, but as something that can be shared, that can be accessible by other families in need. And that's Denise's sharing earlier on. In finance, it's the same thing. There's public banks. We don't have that here. It's kind of interesting to consider. There are private banks and there are money lenders. In the non-profit space, there is microfinance. You can make loans at a decent interest rate for people to start businesses. There's also the possibility of doing interest-free loans to people with urgent credit needs using donated funds. But you moved one further, you move from that that's still service provision, really. Somebody doing something for you. The community building mutual aid part is credit co-ops, where you're pooling your own community's resources to help one another. And the commons really is things like community currencies or interest-free money. You can really, if money that is created now is debt-based money, a bank makes a loan and it gets into circulation, but it creates debt. The people who support community currencies say that community currencies actually support communities who want to have untapped potential and capacities and want a mutual exchange, and it should be interest-free, and it's usually designed as interest-free money. So those are the kind of ideas that, it's new to me, and I will wager a bet it's new to many of us. And so this is how paradigms work, I think. So the tentative learning points and not always applicable guiding sensibilities here today is this: lead with a solution, plant a seed of structural change, bring everyone along, guard against co-optation, practice commoning. And I do this because it's been mentioned, this is depressing work, right? This is my current thinking and insights, having done all this, on how to find meaning and hopefully traction in typically depressing non-profit work. Lead with a solution. It's okay to start with problems, but don't stay on it more than you need. And I say this because if I had gone to MAS or MSF and say, I want to study predatory lending, right? Immediately it would be difficult. But if I say, I want to provide interest-free loans to the community, and I say, oh, okay, we know where you're going to land. That sounds interesting. And because of that, as part of the design process, we can study a bit of predatory lending. Also, solution talk is more energizing, hopeful, connective. And mindsets are hard to change, paradigms hard to challenge, much better to win the argument through doing than through ideological debate, ? These are tentative things I'm thinking about. It's really hard to fight government about, whatever your ideology is, right? Let's say you think universal basic income or you want minimum income standards, whatever. It's really hard to have that battle. Why not do this near-term concrete thing that you can already start, which is, a worker-owned co-op, for example. These things are called realist utopias. They're not theoretical or naive utopias. These things exist. Maybe they don't exist here, but they exist and people are doing it. So They're just examples of how the solutions that we can already start to kind of do rather than just talk about. The second thing I thought was it was important to always find or create solutions that have embedded within them a seed for structural change. The following are, really local responses to global problems. This was what I gathered from the transition towns, right? It's a local response to a global problem, but what if they proliferate? Interest-free loans isn't just to help a small-scale thing, small community. It creates access to credit for the poor, and it undermines predatory lending and extractive finance. There is a longer-term kind of gain for it. Peer-to-peer learning, sure, it can unlock the learning capacity of communities, but importantly, does it displace this billion-dollar tuition industry? Do we really need the private sector to tell us that we need all these celebrity tutors to come and teach your kids when the kids can teach themselves? Worker-owned co-ops, of course, creates economic inclusion, social mobility, because, instead of Silicon Valley profiting, perhaps you should profit from the hard work. And the Abundant Community Initiative, now it's nothing. Maybe in a couple of months, it'll be 2 circles. And who knows, Ang Mo Kio will do it, and then Ang Mo Kio will alleviate, but we eradicated poverty in Ang Mo Kio, who knows? And then Dover or Clementi say, wow, those guys, we cannot lose to them. We must eradicate poverty in our own neighborhood. No permission, no philanthropy, just can't, as long as people agree. The third kind of thinking I had about this was, please, bring everyone along, even those that don't get along. There are social workers in this room, but there are also artists, civic tech, games for change. And the different vantage points is an asset. If you know how to be an artful intermediary, you can broker across divergent, competing, and even antagonistic groups and ideologies. And try out new social technologies that allow kind of coming together, making collective decisions like sociocracy. I've tried it. I forced about more people to try it. And they say, oh, a bit slow, but actually, not bad. Importantly, guard against unintended and well-meaning co-optation. So remember, if you run a nonprofit and you say, I want to contribute to the knowledge commons, I want to make everything, all our program models and everything, do-it-yourself kits free, are you able to do that? Or will your stakeholders, your board say, no, we need to be financially sustainable. Don't think about the sector first, right? You should pay, you should try to license what you are doing, right? And it took me a while to appreciate what the Algebra project had mentioned. It says to them, we will do this all at once or nothing at all. And it's very counterintuitive to our dominant paradigm, which is, let's pick the low-hanging fruits, go for quick wins and see what else we can do. But they were saying, no, we got to do this right. We got to do it all or nothing at all. And to them, it was clear it's not about math. Math is one thing. It is about money. The youth need money. The youth need math education. And the youth need to be organized, contribute to the community, know how to, stage a protest so that they don't build a juvenile detention center when the money can go to support them. So they felt that if I just focus on tuition, it would defeat the purpose. It's not that. It is all at once or nothing at all. And if we do choose to support a solution that sustains or contribute to the systemic problem, is it still worth doing? So if there's a worker co-op that simply creates wealth for a new group while exploiting others, because worker co-ops, you have worker owners, but you can also have an army of employees, right? Foreign labor that you exploit. So commonly shared assets of wealth is constantly under threat from commodification. Also, this one, obviously never think properly, right? So at 4.5, guard against our own cynicism. It's quite easy to dismiss ideas that are outside our paradigm. So, like Adrian mentioned time banks. And I think we've heard, like, time banks won't work here, See, we tried. There were a couple who tried a couple of years ago, it failed. Or cooperatives don't work, It just takes up too much time for people to agree on anything. Much better to have a strong leader. Or building community from the ground up. Singaporeans just too practical and don't really care enough about one another. And these are ways in which the dominant paradigm can dismiss new ideas. And if it's a powerful person saying this, it's much easier to dismiss. So you have to guard against your own cynicism. I don't think these are abstract categories, right? It's not that co-ops or worker co-ops are definitely good. It's a particular version and expression of it that makes it good. Just like a particular version and expression of time banks will make it work in Singapore. I truly believe that. It's not all mentoring is good. Some types of mentoring are good. Some types of mentoring just kind of kind of create. Okay, never mind, no time for that. Practice commoning, pool resources, encourage common ownership and self-management. Peer-to-peer efforts may work better with decentralized or distributed organizational forms. Transition towns. This is such an interesting example. So there was the free cycling movement, and then there's transition towns. Free cycling movement, this guy came up with the idea that your waste is my treasure, and he created free cycling, and he tried to control it. He tried to, centrally say who can use free cycling, and then there was a splinter movement. People didn't like his vision, and they formed other things. Transition towns was this. They did it in one small town, then they started a network, and everyone who wanted to call them transition towns, you can. And then he created a network and connected people. So it was distributed by network, and it proliferated. It proliferated because he didn't want to control what transition towns was. You can do whatever it is you want, and we'll share everything we know, and you share everything, and everyone benefits. Allow everyone to contribute and find ways that let these contributions accumulate coherently, sharing even when it's still in progress, and small is beautiful. And that's it. And thank you very much for having me. One of the things that people said was there's so many identities, and actually today I found a new identity, not childminder, but I'm Justin, I'm a commoner, and thank you, and hopefully see you next year.